From the awe-inspiring scale of slaying the divine dragon to the more realistic sword fights to the death, Sekiro has so much to offer in terms of difficult yet gratifying boss battles. Today we will be ranking them accounting for each character's lore, their intended difficulty by where they are placed within the game and the mechanics required to beat them, and my own experiences playing through them. This isn't meant to be a definitive list of what bosses are the hardest to beat, as I do find that to be somewhat subjective anyway. It is more of a way for me to get to talk about an older game that I still enjoy, and a way for me to poke fun at my boss by riffing off of his formula. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the video. Let's get into it. To start us off, I thought we could go over some honorable mentions that aren't exactly counted among the main bosses from the game, but are still more than just a typical NPC fight. Sekiro's mini-bosses. The first step towards mastering this game's combat was a difficult one for most, and that's why Shikibu Yamauchi Toshikatsu is our first honorable mention. This warrior was a member of Sekiro's version of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist, the 7 Ashina Spears. This was the first enemy that truly showed how beautifully fluid this game's combat could be. He is also a great tutorial boss, displaying that it is not always best to approach a fight head-on, it being much easier to take care of the few surrounding enemies first through stealth, and then stealth attacking him to start the fight, with the boss already at half health. This fight also engraves how useful the Makiri counter will be in future fights, which is used to negate one of the spearman's one-shot thrust attacks, and does a sizable amount of posture damage. All in all, with the sudden spike in difficulty and the game mechanics needed to easily beat this boss becoming essential in the later fights, this mini-boss deserves to be brought up. Much like our next honorable mention, the Great Serpent. There seems to be some debate about how many giant snakes there actually are in the game, as after pretty convincingly killing the first, you can encounter a second near the toxic memorial mob vendor. This second snake is unkillable, yet seems to bear similar wounds to those you gave to the first, hinting that the serpent somehow survived our attack, or since the game clearly states that the snake is a divine being, it's simply reincarnated. Either way, doing the Assassin's Creed leap of faith onto the head of a colossal snake left quite the impression, and I think it deserves a spot. Now on to our main list of bosses, of which there are 14. 3 of those being variations of previous bosses, so in an effort to keep my first video from getting too long, I'll be combining the repeats together, bringing us to 11 entries total. Starting off with without a doubt the weakest and perhaps most tedious boss fight in Sekiro, the Folding Screen Monkeys. It's difficult to even call this a fight, as it's more a puzzle entailing you chasing 4 separate monkeys, each with a different rule on how to capture them. The monkeys are a reference to the 3 wise monkeys proverb of see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil, and do no evil. But what is truly evil was making this a required encounter, as if you are unlucky it can take 15 to 30 minutes of chasing these monkeys around in order to progress the game. This was without a doubt the easiest fight to place. Now let's move on to our number 10 spot, Gyoubu the Demon. This former bandit was possibly one of the 7 Spears of Ashina, as he wields a giant yari and rides atop a warhorse named after the mythic man-eating mount, Onikage. Like the previously mentioned spearman, Gyoubu is a great lesson in mechanics that will become even more useful later on, forcing you to close the distance while having several sweep attacks requiring timely dodges to evade. However, in terms of difficulty, he simply just doesn't measure up to the rest of our list, earning him the number 10 spot. Coming in at number 9, we have Lady Butterfly, the former master of our character Wolf. Despite her age, she is very aggressive and agile, using a mix of the shinobi and temple fighting styles, where she uses both her kunai and her legs in order to attack and deflect. This fight also instills another important lesson. Deflecting is often more advantageous than attacking, as filling your opponent's posture meter allows for an instant death blow that will delete the current health bar of the boss. With how aggressive Lady Butterfly is, and how well she deflects your attacks if not timed properly, the safest way to clear the first phase is by only attacking when she is locked in animation, and deflect her follow-up attacks. In the second phase, she will summon a crowd of illusions to swarm you, as well as jumping on the threads strewn around the room, launching homing butterflies and kunai to attack from a distance. This teaches you how important consumable items can be, as a snap seed instantly destroys all illusions in a wide area around you, and hitting Lady Butterfly with a shuriken while she is perched on the threads will knock her down, dealing a large amount of posture damage. Overall, this is where the climb in difficulty begins, as most bosses before now will require at least a few attempts to learn and overcome, but be ready to spend an hour or two suffering defeat at the hands of your former mentor. Coming up with our number 8 spot on the list is our first combination of fights, the true/corrupted monk. The monk is actually a female priestess named Yao, who is infested with immortality and stands as an obstacle multiple times in your journey. In some ways, the first encounter could be seen as the hardest, as without the use of tools, her health and posture meter are very slow to deplete. Meaning, although she only has 1 health bar, you are stuck having to whittle it down carefully, as the only real opportunities you have to attack are after performing a counter or dodging her attacks. However, since her first form is an illusion, using snap seeds it is possible to stun lock the priestess, never letting her get her offense started. In the second encounter, she has 3 health bars and 3 phases, where her attack styles and strategies change greatly as well as their weaknesses. At first during this encounter, she attacks with her physical body, so snap seeds no longer work, but firecrackers take their place for stunning the boss. In the second phase, she uses illusionary attacks that can be dispelled by snap seeds again. And in the third phase, a giant centipede bursts from her neck, causing her to savagely attack using a combination of her former movesets with some instant kill terror moves thrown in there. This boss serves as a way to refine the tools you have learned and prepares you to use them again in our upcoming entries. Taking the number 7 spot, we have a fight you will only see when attempting the bad Sekiro ending, the Isshin Ashina fight. Now, while Isshin is also another boss on this list, there are reasons why we won't be combining them, which we will get into later. Upon realizing that the owl is right, Sekiro begins to betray Kuro in order to obtain the power of the divine heir. Imma and Isshin both attempt to stop Sekiro, and after killing Imma, all that stands in your way is the former sword saint himself. This is definitely the most difficult fight so far on the list, with Isshin's slower and more controlled swordplay only allowing you to hit him once or twice after a counter before he retaliates. In his second phase, he will also begin to use large fire-spitting AoE moves that can limit the amount of space you have to work with, so it is important to interrupt these with firecrackers. However, with this fight being linked to the worst ending, I only played through it once for the achievement, and can't say I ever plan on revisiting it. In our number 6 spot, we have the adopted warrior of the Ashina clan, Genichiro Ashina. This is the man who cut off your arm in the first battle of the game, and you come to exact your revenge at the top of Ashina Castle. While not much is known about the swordsman, he is among the most respected members of his clan, being trained at the Fountainhead Palace by the mysterious Tomei, the master swordswoman. This fight again takes the mantle of the most difficult on the list thus far, having 3 phases, the first 2 being mostly identical. However, in the last phase, Genichiro channels the teachings of his master Tomei, releasing devastating lightning attacks that, if countered using lightning reversal, is not only one of the most satisfying hits to land in the entire game, but also deals massive posture and health damage, stunning Genichiro for a time. This is one of my favorite skill checks in Sekiro, as the lightning reversal becomes an iconic part of the best boss battles this game has to offer. With the heavy plot and lore relevance that finally approaching Genichiro has after suffering the first defeat, this fight easily beats out the others that came before it. In our closest decision yet, at number 5 we have the father of the main protagonist, Owl the Great Shinobi. This is another combination entry, as it is possible to face the owl again later in the story, but we will focus on the first encounter as they are largely the same, besides a slight ramp up in difficulty and the first encounter being far more important to the plot. This guy brings new meaning to parents being overbearing, demanding absolute subservience of his son, along with the dedication of his life to the owl's cause. The owl is single-mindedly chasing after immortality, uncaring as to who he has to hurt or kill in order to achieve his goal, including his own son. After choosing to serve Kuro and protect the current divine heir, you are forced into a life or death duel against your father, during which he hurls insults at you and degrades you, telling you how he doesn't believe you have it within yourself to bring him down. At first, this fight just feels oppressive, with the owl being able to instantly kill you using the Makiri counter, or the fact that his blows deal incredible amounts of posture damage, so guarding against any of them when you should have dodged can be a fatal mistake. The owl forces you to take the skills taught by earlier bosses and hone them into a sharpened edge. Both the thematic relevance to the plot and the father-son dynamic just barely gives it the edge over Genichiro's fight, which I think is a larger spectacle than this one. However, neither of them can compare to the fights further down the list. Coming in at number 4, we have our final combination fight, the Guardian Ape / the Headless Ape. The non-human bosses of Sekiro are some of the best the game has to offer, which is represented by them dominating the top spots of the list. This massive beast is an immortal creature on the hunt for another mate after its first was killed, which almost leads you to feel sorry for the animal. However, then it throws its shit at you, sealing its own fate. I've already made a short video about this monkey and how I think the psych out that leads to its second phase is perhaps the best in gaming. But honestly, the most difficult part for me was always surviving the first phase with enough healing items to afford making 1 or 2 mistakes the entire second phase. As once the giant primate picks up its sword, his moveset becomes far closer to what you are accustomed to. Encountering those moves always felt much easier than the first set. Also, in the second phase, it's possible to use the loaded spear to rip out the giant centipede that is granting the monster eternal life, causing a large amount of posture and health damage, assisting in ending the fight. However, after defeating the ape, you can encounter him again, this time minus 1 head, but plus a new mate. Yet fortunately, Sekiro defeats them both, ensuring this bastard is never able to live a happy life. In at number 3, we have without a doubt the most fantastic spectacle in this game, the fight with the Divine Dragon. The dragon is a representation of many of the game's characters and themes, such as only having 1 arm similar to Sekiro or the sculptor, or having literal dragon rot that is affecting it, turning the tree that grows from it to a sickly pale color. As well as the dragon wielding a massive sword based on one of Japan's oldest relics, the 7-branched sword. While you can deflect one of the dragon's non-perilous strikes, it will never fill up its posture meter. As the dragon is a deity and is unable to die, we can only stun it using the patented No-U reversal, temporarily paralyzing the creature, allowing us to gather a divine tear. While I'll admit this fight is nothing when comparing difficulty, everything else about this fight is awesome, from the location to your opponent and the mechanics necessary to win. It only loses out to the next 2 entries on the list due to how they better encapsulate the difficulty level that is the rest of the game. Coming in at our number 2 spot, we have the final boss of the storyline, Isshin the Sword Saint. To start out the first phase of this fight, you are actually up against Genichiro, who has managed to obtain the Black Mortal Blade. After defeating him again with a mostly similar moveset to the previous fight, Genichiro sacrifices himself using the Mortal Blade in order to resurrect a younger, more violent version of his grandfather, the Sword Saint Isshin. Isshin is unlike any other boss in the game, actively learning how you react to his attacks and changing them to catch you off guard. Combine this with having the deepest arsenal of weapons and attacks of any opponent you have faced so far, including a spear, a bow, and a Glock, you will spend days stuck on this fight being taunted over and over again, with the lesson that hesitation is defeat. When I finally defeated Isshin for the first time, the scream of victory that came out of me surely alarmed my neighbors. I've never had a win in a game feel so satisfying, so deserved as I persevered in a fight where everything was stacked against you. This single boss will always make me remember this game fondly, until I remember the trauma instilled by the boss in our number 1 spot. At last, coming in at number 1, we have the Demon of Hatred, the only boss in Sekiro I haven't been able to defeat. To me, this feels like whoever designed the first phase of the Guardian Ape fight turned its difficulty up to 11, gave it 3 health bars and a giant AoE fire attack that can easily kill you if you aren't always ready to dodge. This fight is also extremely significant to the lore of the game, as the sculptor who outfits and upgrades your prosthetic arm turns out to actually be the incarnation of the Demon of Hatred, who had once been stopped by the Sword Saint Isshin in the past, who cut off his arm believing that by robbing the sculptor of his ability to kill, he would never again transform into Ashura. However, the inner hatred the sculptor feels towards the world due to his partner Kingfisher being murdered eventually morphs him again, forcing us to step in and attempt to put him out of his misery. This is meant to show where the path of bloodshed leads. While at first you might feel justified in the taking of another's life, eventually it becomes far too easy, and you begin to seek out bloodshed for no other reason than to try and feel alive. One day, I'll need to pick this game up again and finally attempt to help the sculptor achieve some kind of peace. That's it for the first video on this channel. I hope you all enjoyed going over some of the best fights from, in my opinion, one of the best Soulsborne games. If any of you Soulsborne aficionados notice anything that I got wrong, please correct me in the comments and I'll make sure it's visible for others to see. Let me know what other series, Soulsborne or not, you would like to hear me talk about. Please remember to like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed it. This being my first video, I greatly appreciate any constructive criticism you can leave me in the comments. Thanks again for watching and I'll see you next time.